Hi, I'm Peter. Welcome to this rerun of our live stream event. I'm going to be sharing tips for the AQA exam this summer. So we're going to work our way through the different parts of the questions on paper 1 and paper 2. And we're going to start off with the 2 and 4 markers. Now, my take on this, I always said to my students, you should get 6 out of 6 on the early parts of a question. And yet it's so easy to drop marks. And we're going to be looking over the next few minutes how you can avoid that. How can you avoid that careless mark drop, which is going to perhaps move you down a grade if you're on the grade boundaries, and saving that mark, of course, moves you up a grade. So the key, I think, is to have a highlighter in your hand. I want you to highlight the question. Everything significant in the question you are going to highlight. So here we're highlighting 2010. We're highlighting, we're looking at 6.91 million households in England who live in rented accommodation. Using extract D, calculate to the nearest 500,000 the total number of households in England in 2010. And that really helps to focus your mind, highlighting the question in that way. What you're then going to do is you're going to go into the chart and you're going to highlight that too. So you'll see here that I've highlighted extract D. That's great. We now know we're working with the right chart because that agrees with what we highlighted in the question. I've highlighted as a percentage of households because that's significant in the title. And I know from highlighting the question that we're looking for households in rented accommodation. So you can see that I've highlighted rented in those bottom 2 rows of the table. And I'm looking for 2010 as well, so I've highlighted the 2010 column of the table. And highlighting those 2 rows and that column taken together has told us that the 2 figures that matter here are the 18% of households in social rented accommodation and the 14% of households in private rented. So there we have it. We've got 32% of households living in rented accommodation. Now the calculation is quite straightforward. All I need to do is take that 6.91 million households. We know that's 32% of households. If I divide by 32, that's 1%. Multiply by 100, I've got the total number of households. Now, I'm quite tempted to leave the answer there at 21.59 million, but of course we've highlighted in the question, but we've got to round to the nearest 500,000. So my final answer is going to be 21.5 million. Now, a couple of things to point out. If you don't round to the nearest 500,000, you're going to get 1 mark out of 2. If you don't say millions, if you just said 21.5, you're going to get 1 mark out of 2. And of course, that could be really costly when it comes to a final grading. So let's move on to the 4 markers. These are the ones that say explain how the data show that. Now, I've got a very particular technique for 4 markers. I think you answer them in 4 sentences. You define the key term, and here that's higher real GDP per capita. You do 2 key facts supported by the data, and then you link the data back to the question. Now you can see I've highlighted the question in just the same way as I did for a 2 marker. And we're now going to go in and highlight the data in the same way. Extract A, yes, I know I'm using the right chart. 2012, because I'm going to need to quote that year when I'm doing my 2 key facts. We know from highlighting the question we're looking for real GDP per capita, highlight that column. Life expectancy, highlight that column. And I'm now going to have a quick scan down those columns and look for a couple of significant facts. Well, straight away I can see that the UK has got the highest real GDP per capita and the highest life expectancy. So I'm going to quote that as one of my facts. And I can see the Central African Republic has got the lowest real GDP per capita and the lowest life expectancy. So there's another fact. And then all I need to do for my 4th sentence is link that back. So I can say here that this makes sense because countries with higher real GDP per capita are going to be able to afford better healthcare, and that's going to feed through to higher life expectancy. So job done. 4 sentences, 4 marks. We've got 6 out of 6, and we're nicely set up as we go on to the longer parts of the question. So the next one is the 9 marker. This is one that says, with the help of a diagram. Okay, we're going to have a look at this one, which is about lowering of barriers to entry in the banking market and how that might lead to lower price. And notice the and there. a situation in which banks make normal profit. So you've got to do both things because it says said and. Okay, now right at the centre of your answer to a 9 marker is always going to be a clear and correct diagram. It's unlikely you're going to go beyond about 4 out of 9 if you haven't got a clear and correct diagram in your answer. We're going to use this one. Notice I've given it a title. It says entry limit pricing in the banking market. Okay, now the great thing about that is I'm instantly applying the diagram to a situation, to the banking market. The examiner can write a little AP by the diagram to show that I've shown application. And in a 9 marker, you do have to show knowledge, analysis, and application. Okay, and in regards to the application, you've got to write your answer in the context of a banking market. If you did the best answer anyone could possibly do about how lowering entry barriers leads to lower prices and a situation of firms making normal profit, you did the best answer you could possibly do, but didn't mention banking, you're not going to get more than 7 out of 9. So you've got to put it in the context of the question. Okay. Now let's look at what you might write alongside that diagram. You're going to show knowledge by defining a key term, and here that's probably going to be normal profit. And then you're going to create what we examiners call a chain of analysis. Okay, this is really explaining things in a step-by-step way. So here we can say that lower entry barriers make a market more contestable. Okay, and what that means is the threat of new challengers, in this case challenger banks, may change the behaviour of incumbent banks in the market. Thing is, these banks don't want new firms coming in. So what they might do is adopt something called entry limit pricing in order to deter new entrants. Okay, so thinking back to the diagram, normally we'd think in terms of maximizing at price PM where MR equals MC. But actually what the firm now is going to do is lower the price to what we had on the diagram as PEL, the entry limit price, which is where AR equals AC. Okay. Don't miss the opportunity to get in a quote from the data, because that's another way of showing application. So we've got this lovely quote that contestability improved value for money for all customers. We can drop that in. So the firm's pricing where average revenue equals average costs, that means there's just enough revenue to cover the opportunity costs of the factors they've used. And lo and behold, this means that firms in the banking market make only normal profit. So we've got there. We've discussed lower prices and we've discussed normal profits for banks just as a result of the lowering of entry barriers. And we've got a lovely 8-link chain of analysis here, and that counts as really good analysis in the examiner's eyes. So let's talk a little bit more about the skill of analysis. A few years ago, one of my students, Louis, had a light bulb moment shortly before the exam. He said, "Sir, I've just realised," he says, "for analysis, it's teaching the examiner. I've got to pretend the examiner knows nothing about economics, and I've got to explain it to them in as much detail as I possibly can, step by step, that makes sense to someone who isn't necessarily an economist." And Louis got excited, and I got excited. I'm still quite excited about it now, because I think that's such a brilliant way of looking at it. You're going to teach the examiner. So here on screen, we've got a student who's writing about policy to reduce obesity. And they've made a point, one policy to reduce obesity is a unit tax on sugary drinks. Now, they've done quite a nice chain of analysis here. They've got 4 links in it. They've got a nice diagram by the side, which makes sense. And, hats off to this student. They've given it a title, The Market for Sugary Drinks. So they've got their little AP from the examiner by the diagram. But I think they've missed so many opportunities here where they could have increased the detail in their analysis. So each of the blue arrows is one extra link that the student could have put in the analysis. Let's talk that through. So one policy to reduce obesity is unit tax on sugary drinks. Now you've got a chance to do a definition of a unit tax, or alternatively, or even both, you could say that a unit tax will raise costs of production for firms. Now that's really good because that explains the next link. It raises costs of production for firms, and this reduces the supply of sugary drinks. Now have a think about this. If there's been a reduction in supply, if we were still at that initial price of P1, because there's been a reduction of supply, there's now going to be an excess demand. Okay, there's going to be an excess demand at that price, and you can always use that with supply and demand analysis. Whenever you disturb the equilibrium by shifting one of the curves, it's going to create an excess supply or an excess demand. Don't miss that step. Okay, so in this case, we've got an excess demand, and this is going to raise the price. It's going to force the price up from P1 to P2. Now think about how that affects consumers of sugary drinks. Okay, because the price has gone up, they may now substitute towards alternatives which are relatively cheaper. So they may substitute towards bottled water, for example. So that can go in as a link in the chain, and this results in a contraction of demand. So we're almost there, but think about which function of prices we're dealing with here. This contraction of demand is the rationing function of prices in action. So that leads to this contraction from Q1 to Q2, and we've now got a new equilibrium established with a higher price and a lower quantity, and of course that's what the policy was intended to do, to reduce the quantity. So that's excellent analysis. We've turned a 4-link chain into an 8-link chain, and that really is the quality of the analysis, that the examiner is looking for. So we're always going to look to write our analysis in as much detail as possible. Okay, while we go through this presentation, I'm just going to take the opportunity to flag up 1 or 2 ways in which Economics Factory can help you over coming weeks. One of the biggest ways is that I've got an exam preparation class just for AQA starting next Monday. And over 14 successive Mondays, we're going to build towards the actual exam. So the last class will be just before the first micro exam. And week by week, I'm going to be covering technique, I'm going to be covering content, and I'm going to be looking particularly at the content that I think is most likely to come up in the exams this summer. And we're going to be looking at facts and examples about what's going on in the UK economy as well, so that you're right up to date when you go into the exam. So if you think that's going to be of interest to you, why not pause the presentation at this point? There's a QR code on screen which will take you to all the details. So now it's time, I think, that we got on to the big questions. So 25 markers. 25 markers, you're going to do knowledge, analysis and application, just like you did actually for a 9 marker, but probably more detailed. So you're going to do probably 2 points for a 25 marker. If you can do 3 points, that's great, but I think you should test that out in advance by doing timed practice. If you consistently find you can cover 3 points well, brilliant, do 3 points. If that's just too much, I'd rather see you do 2 points really well than 3, in a less sort of strong fashion, because in the end it's a levels of response mark scheme. So if you can do 2 points to right level, you've got a chance still of getting right to the top of the mark scheme with that. So you're going to do knowledge, analysis, application, and then I want you to do your evaluation in a separate paragraph. Okay. The reason for that is that I think you're going to evaluate more fully if you do it in a separate paragraph than if you do it at the end of your paragraph of analysis. So once you've read the 25 mark question, what I want you to do is to go in and highlight the extracts. You're looking for bits of the extract that you can use. Now, a really key tip with this one, massively important, look for numbers in the text. Those numbers are usually planted there by the examiner to help you quantify things, to help you reach reasoned judgments, to weigh up the significance of things. And so here I've gone into the text and I've highlighted a couple of bits that have got numbers in, and we're going to use those in a few minutes. Okay, so having gone through our knowledge, analysis and application for how a unit tax may reduce demand for sugary drinks, very often then a student will say, however, the unit tax may be ineffective if demand for sugary drinks is inelastic. And the student's absolutely right about that. Okay, that is evaluation. But I think it's kind of fairly basic evaluation. It's the start of something which could be much fuller. Okay, and I want you to move away from just using one line of evaluation, a however point. Apart from anything, the student hasn't reached a judgment there. They've said it may be ineffective, but they haven't reached a judgment about whether it will be ineffective or not. So when it comes to supporting judgments, doing really good economic evaluation, you've got two ways to do that. You can either support judgments using economic theory, or you can support them using real-world evidence. Okay, now this student makes a good start now moving on to better evaluation by using some economic theory. So actually, economic theory tells us that goods that are habitually consumed tend to have inelastic demand. And sugary drinks are habitually consumed. Some consumers may even be addicted to them. So we're now reaching a judgment. It's likely that demand is going to be inelastic, and therefore the policy will be ineffective. But we don't really know until we've gone in and looked at real world evidence. And fortunately, the data extracts have helped us with that. Okay, so remember those numbers we highlighted? Evidence from the World Health Organization shows that a tax on sugary drinks that raises prices by 20% on average leads to a reduction in consumption of around 20%. Well, actually, therefore, the price elasticity of demand is unitary. It's not inelastic. So the policy is going to be more effective than we thought. And furthermore, research tells us that we've recently introduced sugar tax in the UK has prevented more than 5,000 cases of obesity every year amongst girls in their final year of primary education. Okay, so that's further evidence that the policy can be effective. And now we're moving our evaluation to a much higher level by using real-world evidence to support judgments. And now we're going to seal the deal with the examiner by reaching a mini judgment at the end of our paragraph of evaluation. And here my mini judgment would be that unit taxation is significantly effective in reducing the consumption of sugary drinks. And then we can layer on top of that, it's got other benefits. It's going to bring in revenue for the government. But they get ring-fenced for things such as funding exercise activities. We can really drive home the point because the extract also told us that sugar taxes in South Africa and Mexico have proven to be effective. So that's more evidence that it's a good way to go with policy. So at the end of my mini judgment, I may even be suggesting that the UK might wish to extend things and not just have a sugar tax, but have a tax on fatty foods as well, because there's evidence here that it works. Okay, now these mini judgments you're going to reach at the end of each paragraph of evaluation are eventually going to build to support your final conclusion. So we're nearly there now. If we can do that 2 or 3 times, we're going to be writing a really good 25 marker. We just really need to clinch things with our final judgment. Okay, here's where you need my conclusion test. So my conclusion test, part 1, says that if the examiner reads only your conclusion, they should know what the question was. Okay, easiest way to do this is to state your judgment in the first line of your conclusion and reflect back the wording of the question to the examiner. So something along the lines of, in final judgment, the evidence suggests that the best policy to reduce obesity is. Okay, so instantly the examiner can see that you are evaluating what's the best policy to reduce obesity. If the examiner can't tell what the question was just by reading your conclusion, but chances are that you haven't actually quite answered the question. Second part of my conclusion test is if the examiner reads the rest of your answer, they should be able to write the conclusion for you. And that's because the rest of your answer builds into and supports your conclusion. So you might occasionally include something new in the conclusion. Yeah, you might bring in, for example, one extra point, which is going to support your best policy to really drive home that this is your judgment and you've got good support for it. But really, it's your main body of your essay, which is supporting your conclusion. I think you can prioritise the reasons for your judgment in your conclusion, because that's sort of evaluation in itself. The most important reason for this judgment is, and sometimes you might qualify your judgment as well. So in this essay, some students might have suggested a behavioural policy as being best. But they might reasonably have said, I can't have 100% confidence in this, however, because actually behavioural policy is relatively new. The evidence we've got to support it isn't, the evidence base isn't quite strong enough yet. That would be a reasonable way of qualifying the judgment. Okay, so we've now completely nailed the context question, 2, 4, 9, 25 marks, and we're well on our way to a top grade. If I could just flag up at this point, but we've got practice papers at Economics Factory, which are on the topics that I think are most likely to be examined in the summer, what I call due topics. And the way I do this is I think what topics haven't been examined since this exam was first tested in 2017? Or now that most topics have been examined, which topics haven't been examined for quite a few years? Which ones last came up in 2018 or 2019? Something like that. And what I then do is I write brand new exam papers on those topics. So there's 2 micro papers and 2 macro papers, and detailed mark schemes with them as well, which give you a really good idea of the content the examiners would be looking for in answer to those questions. Okay, we should get on to the essays. And the good news is that we've already done a lot of the groundwork when we've been looking at the data questions. So you've got 3 essays to choose from, 15 and 25 marks. Each essay is divided into. So a 15 marker, knowledge, analysis, application. I think you're going to do 2 chains of analysis here. You might occasionally do 3, especially if you practice and you know you've got time to do it. But I think it's most likely 2 paragraphs. You're going to be showing knowledge through definitions. You're going to be doing your chains of analysis. Very important, again, that you include examples for application. Now, the application can be more difficult in essays than it was in data questions because, of course, you haven't got data extracts to refer to. But my advice to you is never ignore the stem of the question. You can see the question in the light blue box on screen. It's got 4 or 5 lines of information before the question starts. And that information is often really useful to you in writing your answer. So here we're looking at factors that firms might consider when they're thinking about whether to shut down in the short run, and notice that word "and" again, and in the long run. You might be struggling for examples with this one, except the stem of the question gives you them. So the stem of the question mentions Homebase, House of Fraser, Pound World. All firms have been facing these decisions in recent years. You can use those for your examples, for your application. In a 15 marker, you're usually going to do 1 diagram, again with a title, important for that application. And in many ways, a 15 marker is like a slightly longer 9 marker from the context question because the skills tested are being the same, knowledge, analysis and application. But you're going to be doing at least 2 chains of analysis, I think, for a 15 marker. Okay. Now coming to a 25 marker. On the essay, this is very similar to the data 25 marker. The skills are the same. Remember, you're going to do 2 or 3 points. You're going to analyse them fully in 1 paragraph. Then you're going to leave a line and do a separate full paragraph of evaluation with a mini judgment at the end of the paragraph of evaluation. And remember your final judgment and that your conclusion must meet the requirements of my conclusion test. Okay, so what I'm really emphasising throughout the presentation tonight is actually the importance of analysis as a skill and getting better at doing the links in chain analysis. People think the 25 markers are about evaluation, but actually you've got to do good analysis before you can do your evaluation. And actually, if you do good analysis with very minimal evaluation, that can get you to the top of level 3, which is 15 out of 25, possibly even edging into level 4, 16 out of 25. True, it's your good quality evaluation, which is then going to take you up level 4 and into level 5 and towards full marks. But your analysis is so key. And so, you can't ice a cake if it hasn't been baked. Your analysis is the cake, or your knowledge, your analysis, and your application. The icing of the cake is your evaluation. And for me, the cherry on top is evaluating using real-world evidence to support your judgments. So often, to me, that's the hallmark of a level 5 answer, that the student's using real-world evidence. Okay. Now, of course, that's more difficult in an essay question than in a data question. But I want you to be students of the economy from this point onwards until your exam. Keep following what's going on in the economics news. Make notes of examples and data that you can use in your answers. Okay. And so when you go into the exam room, you're going to take a lot of information into the exam room with you. Don't get caught, it's cheating. Um, memorize your facts and your examples. That's incredibly important. Okay. And what I'm going to recommend to you, particularly for macro, where there's a lot of facts about macroeconomic performance and recent policy that you can memorize for the exam, is before the exam, make sure that you use one of the videos that people put out, covering the recent performance of macroeconomy. Um, I'll probably do one shortly before Easter, and then I'll update it in the run up to the exams as well when we get really close to the exams. We'll just cover the key facts in the macroeconomy for you. I know my former student, Econ Plus Dal, does similar videos which are really popular as well. And of course, I can vouch for him that he knows his stuff. So, those videos are a real recommendation for you. They give you facts, examples that you can use for application, but also to support your judgments with real world information. Okay, so we're nearly there. One final plug, if I may. We've got a model answer collection for AQA, and that has answers to every single past paper question. Multiple choice, 2, 4, 9, 25 markers, 15 markers, 25 markers, all the paper 3 questions as well. Every single past paper question from 2017 to 2023. So if you're practicing a question during a revision, you can then turn to the model answer and you can get an idea if the content is along the lines of what the examiners are looking for. So I've got one final piece of really important advice that I want to leave with you with, and that's make the examiner hate you. Not make the examiner hate you, make your teacher hate you. Okay. Why would I say that? Why would you want your teacher to hate you? Reason for that is you are going to be following your teacher around for the next few months. Every time your teacher turns around, you're going to be behind them and you're going to be saying, "Sir, miss, I've done a timed question under exam conditions. Can you mark it for me? Can you give me some feedback?" And then you're going to take that feedback and you're going to do another question and try and use the feedback to improve your answer. And then you're going to go chasing your teacher again. "Sir, miss, please mark this one for me." And after that, you're going to do another one. Okay, that's the most valuable exam preparation you can do. Okay, you do not know when you go into the exam that you can do it unless you've actually practiced doing it in advance. Don't take chances on just saying, can I do it or not? You've got to practice doing it. I promise you, practice will get you better and better, particularly if you're responding to your teacher's feedback. Yeah. So hopefully your teacher's going to be sick of the sight of you by the exam, but they'll also have enjoyed working with you. That sort of cooperation between the teacher and the student, to get you the best grade, and they'll look forward to celebrating with you on results day as well. I cannot emphasize enough how important that timed practice is. It is absolutely vital, and in my opinion, the most valuable thing you can do in preparation for your exam. Okay, so I hope you found the rerun of the live stream useful. Hope it's given you some tips to use. Please do keep in touch with Economics Factory during the coming months as you prepare for your exams. Take a look at what we've got that can help you with those preparations. And hopefully I'll see you at another event soon, perhaps at tutoring or on another live stream. And thanks ever so much for being part of this presentation tonight. Thank you.